Todd carefully adjusted the feeding pump, making sure the line wasn't tugging too hard as it clicked softly into place beside Will's chair. Will stared at the floor, jaw tight. "I still hate this shit," he typed, the screen brightness reflected in his tired eyes. "Why can't I grieve for Tom like normal? Now I can't eat now." The room went quiet for a moment, the only sound the soft mechanical hum of the pump warming up. Todd didn't rush him. "It's hard, I know," he said gently. "But we still need to go to your feeding therapy, so lay down so we can get you cleaned up and into a fresh diaper, all right?" Will's fingers hovered over the tablet. He didn't respond right away. Henry leaned against the doorway, arms crossed but voice softer than his words suggested. "Will, Tom would want you to move on, not sit here sulking over your dead boyfriend." That hit harder than anyone expected. Will's hands tightened around the tablet. Then he typed slower this time. "Do you have a book report to do?" A sharp, awkward silence followed. Todd exhaled through his nose like he was trying not to react too strongly. Henry blinked once, caught off guard, then looked away. "Nice deflection," Henry muttered, but there was no anger in it anymore. Todd crouched a little so he was at Will's eye level. "Hey, you don't have to talk about it right now, but you do have to let us help you take care of you." The pump beeped softly, ready. Will didn't move for a long moment. Then finally he set the tablet down on his lap, not agreeing, not refusing, just existing in the space between. Todd straightened up, checking his watch like he was already mentally running the schedule. "Go to the van," he said firmly. Then his eyes shifted to Henry. "Henry, come, you're still grounded from the party you had last week by yourself." Henry scoffed, shifting his backpack strap. "I have homework." Todd didn't even pause. "I have a hotspot." "Grab your stuff, we're there for 2 hours." Henry blinked. "Huh?" Todd pointed toward the hallway like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Will has feeding 30 minutes, OT 30 minutes, PT 30 minutes, speech 30 minutes, total 2 hours. He tapped the schedule on his phone to make it clear he wasn't guessing. Henry dragged a hand through his hair. "That's insane, it's necessary," Todd replied, already turning toward Will. "So let's move, get in the van now." Will didn't say anything, just slowly picked up his things, the earlier tension still sitting heavy in his posture. Henry muttered under his breath but followed anyway, slinging his bag over his shoulder. Outside, the air was cooler than the building, and the van sat waiting with the sliding door already open like it had been expecting them the whole time. The van door slid shut with a heavy thump, sealing in the low hum of the engine and the faint smell of sanitizer wipes and fast food napkins in the cup holders. Will sat near the middle seat, tablet resting on his knees. His fingers moved slowly. "Henry, welcome to a day in my life." A small smile tugged at Will's mouth, brief, almost surprised it showed up at all. Henry glanced over, eyebrows raised, oh great, tour guide mode. Will's smile widened just a little. Henry leaned back in his seat, arms crossed. "Go back to being sad for your dead boyfriend." The words landed blunt but not as sharp as before, more tired than cruel. Will's thumbs hovered over the screen for a second, then he typed, "I'm thinking about it," a beat. He added, "I know." Todd, driving, let out a quiet breath through his nose that might have been a laugh if you caught it right. "Good answer." Henry rolled his eyes, but the corner of his mouth twitched anyway. "Yeah, well, try not to turn this into a vlog, all right." Will leaned his head back against the seat, still holding the tablet loosely. Outside the window, the city slid by in gray streaks, just another stop in a day that wasn't asking anyone if they were ready for it. Henry looked over from the back seat, expression somewhere between confused and impressed. "You did this and went to school at the same time." Will nodded once before typing. "No, everything was in school, but I'm out of school so." The unfinished sentence said enough on its own. Todd glanced at Henry in the mirror. "Henry, you were mad when we told you Will might stay at your high school until he was 21. Henry rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. "You said he'd stay for a few years for therapy. I didn't understand at the time." "Yeah," Todd replied quietly, "but now hospitals." That word alone changed the mood again. Will stared out the van window at passing traffic, watching people walk down sidewalks carrying groceries and coffees like normal life still existed somewhere outside therapy schedules and feeding pumps. Henry's voice lost some of its edge. "I thought you just got extra help classes or something," Will typed back slowly. I used to have therapy between classes, then more after school, then home nurses, then hospital stuff. Henry blinked every day. Will gave a small shrug. Todd answered for him pretty much. The van grew quiet again, but this time it wasn't angry silence. It was the kind that came after finally understanding something you should have understood earlier. The van rolled into the therapy center parking lot, tires crunching softly over loose gravel near the curb. Todd parked and shut the engine off. "We're here." Will leaned his head back against the seat with a long sigh, like arriving somehow made him even more tired. Before opening the door, Todd glanced down and checked the wetness indicator on Will's diaper with the practiced ease of routine. "You're dry," he said simply. Henry immediately made a face from the next seat over. "This is weird." Will looked at him for a second, then picked up the tablet. "Try living in it, you won't last an hour." Henry opened his mouth with some smart reply ready, but nothing came out this time. Instead, he just looked away toward the therapy building windows where nurses and therapists moved through the halls carrying clipboards and coffee cups. Todd slid the van door open. "All right, let's go." Will shifted carefully as Todd disconnected the portable pump battery from the charging cable and clipped the bag securely onto the back of wheelchair. Henry watched all of it happen in silence now, the tubing, the medical bag, the careful routine, and for the first time it didn't look weird to him. It looked exhausting. 2 hours later, the therapy center hallways had gone quieter. Most of the afternoon appointments were ending and the waiting room TV played softly while parents gathered bags and jackets. Henry sat slouched in the chair with homework spread across his lap, earbuds hanging around his neck, unused. He looked up when Todd came out from the therapy area. Todd looked tired, too. "Henry," he said quietly, "Will's gonna come out sleepy, so just give him some space." "All right, I'll change him and then we can go." Henry nodded once, "Okay." A few minutes later, Will finally appeared in the hallway beside a therapist, eyes half open and posture slumped from exhaustion. The feeding bag hung from his chair while the therapy notes folder rested in his lap crookedly, like he'd stopped caring where anything went. He looked drained, not dramatic, not angry, just completely worn out. Henry watched silently as Todd crouched beside the wheelchair, speaking softly to Will while checking his supplies bag. "You did good today," Todd told him. "Let's get you cleaned up before we head home." Will barely lifted the tablet before typing slowly. "Can I sleep in the van?" Todd smiled a little. "Yeah, buddy, you can sleep." Henry looked down at his homework again, but this time he wasn't annoyed about being there anymore. Henry walked beside the wheelchair as they headed toward the exit doors, his backpack hanging off one shoulder. "Let's go home so you can relax, Will." Will looked up at him, surprised by how normal the comments sounded compared to earlier. He lifted the tablet with slow, tired movements. "Yes, if you want, I can help you finish your homework after my nap if you want." Henry blinked. "You'd actually help me." Will gave a tiny shrug. "I am not dead." That got a short laugh out of Henry before he could stop himself. "Yeah, okay, fair point." Todd opened the van door and carefully locked the wheelchair into place. "Homework tutoring after nap time, huh? Sounds exciting." Will rolled his eyes weakly and typed again, "Don't ruin it." Henry smirked as he climbed into the seat beside him. Too late, he already did. For the first time all day, the ride home didn't feel tense. Quiet, yes, heavy still, but softer somehow, like everyone inside the van had finally stopped fighting the same storm separately. The van engine rumbled to life with a steady hum vibration filling the quiet space. Will had already drifted off. His head tilted slightly toward the window, breathing slow and even, tablet slipping a little in his lap before Todd gently adjusted it so it wouldn't fall. Todd glanced in the rearview mirror. "What are you working on?" Henry shifted in his seat, pulling his notebook closer like he suddenly remembered he had something due. "A book report?" Todd nodded. "On what?" Henry flipped a page out of My Mind by Sharon Draper. Todd made a small acknowledging sound as he pulled out of the parking lot. "Good choice. What's it about?" Henry hesitated for a second, then spoke a little more carefully. "The main character has CP like Will, but the character is a girl." He glanced toward the backseat without really meaning to wake Will, then lowered his voice slightly anyway. "She can't talk at first, but she's really smart. People just assume she doesn't understand anything." Todd's eyes stayed on the road, but his tone softened. "That's a big part of it, yeah." Henry tapped his pencil against his notebook. I didn't really think about it like that before. In the back, Will shifted slightly in his sleep but didn't wake, the motion of the van and the warmth of exhaustion keeping him down. Todd drove a little slower than usual. Books like that, he said quietly, are kind of the point of therapy too, just in a different way. Henry looked down at his page again, then wrote a line more carefully than before. The van settled into a steady rhythm on the highway, city noise fading behind them. Todd kept one hand on the wheel, glancing briefly at Henry in the mirror. You chose that because of Will. Henry frowned, defensive again. I didn't pick it, my teacher did for me. Todd nodded, once not pushing it. All right. Henry looked down at his notebook, pencil hovering without writing for a moment. It's just a book. There was a pause, then he added quieter. I mean, I guess it's about someone like him, but it's not like I was trying to make it about him. In the backseat, Will stayed asleep, head still turned toward the window, breathing steady and deep. Todd's voice softened, doesn't have to be intentional for it to hit close to home. Henry didn't answer right away. He just stared at the title on his paper like it had changed meaning a little since he said it out loud. Yeah, he finally muttered. The rest of the drive continued in calm silence, the kind that didn't feel empty anymore, just full of things nobody was rushing to explain. Todd kept his eyes on the road, hands steady on the wheel. Ms. Williams was Will's teacher as well. Henry looked up from his notebook, surprised. I didn't know that. Todd nodded slightly. Yeah, before things shifted to hospital tutoring and therapy scheduling, she was part of his school support team. Henry glanced toward the backseat where Will was still asleep, his breathing slow and even completely unaware of the conversation. Oh, Henry said after a moment, she didn't say anything about that. Todd gave a small shrug. She probably didn't think it was relevant to your assignment. Henry tapped his pencil against the page again, thinking she just gave it to me like a normal book report. Yeah, Todd replied, that's kind of the point. You're still expected to think about it as a student, not just compare everything to someone you know. Henry frowned slightly at that, then nodded like he was trying to separate the ideas properly in his head. In the backseat, Will shifted a little in his sleep but didn't wake, one hand loosely curled around his tablet. Henry lowered his voice a bit. It's weird though, what is just not realizing how many people actually know him in different ways? Todd didn't answer right away. He just watched the road for a moment longer before speaking. Yeah, he said quietly, it usually is. The van rolled into the driveway just as the evening light started turning orange against the houses. Todd parked and turned around in his seat. Will, wake up, buddy, we're home. Will stirred slowly, blinking hard like he forgot where he was for a second. His neck was stiff from sleeping in the chair and he made a tired face as he lifted his head. Todd smiled faintly. I'll change you and then you can help Henry. Will rubbed one eye before pulling the tablet closer. Wow, no rest for the disabled. Henry snorted from the next seat over. You offered. Will stared at him for a second, then typed again. True, unfortunate. Todd laughed quietly as he opened the van door. Come on, let's get inside first. The cool evening air hit them as Todd carefully unlocked the wheelchair and guided Will down the ramp. Henry followed behind, carrying both his backpack and Will's therapy folder without being asked. Will noticed immediately. He typed while rolling beside him. Character development, Henry groaned. Don't make it weird. Will's tired grin came back for a second anyway. Will stared at his tablet for a second longer than usual, thumbs hovering like he wasn't sure if he even wanted to type it out. Then he did. She was a great teacher. I gave her my report on that book. She asked why I didn't put my bullying in the report. I told her I wasn't ever bullied. She said stop lying to yourself and rewrite it or you'll get an F. I told her give me an F. Then she gave me an F. The room went quiet in that way where even normal household sounds feel louder. Henry stopped flipping pages. Todd, who had just finished setting down supplies near the hallway, slowly looked back over. She called your mom and me, Todd said after a moment. She told us what happened. Will didn't react much, just leaned back into the couch like he already knew where this was going. Todd continued more carefully. There was a conference with Will, his aide, mom, the principal, and her, and it was about it. Henry frowned, so what she got in trouble. Todd hesitated, not dramatic, just choosing words. It wasn't that simple, he said. She believed she was pushing him to be honest in his writing. We didn't all agree on how she did it. Will typed smaller this time. I still don't like her. Henry glanced at him. Yeah, I can see why. Todd crossed his arms, but after that things changed. They made rules about assignments like that and about how teachers handle personal stuff in writing. Will gave a short, tired shrug like the whole thing was filed away in his memory under things I already survived. Henry looked down at his book again, quieter now, so she wasn't just being random. Will typed one last line. No, just intense. Bate stepped into the room, dropping her keys into the bowl by the door. Why is everyone annoyed? She asked, noticing the shift in the room's mood right away. Will didn't hesitate. He typed, "That bitch did it again, Mom." Bate blinked. What? Todd exhaled a little, rubbing the bridge of his nose like he was trying to keep things calm. Ms. Williams, The Book Out of My Mind by Sharon Draper. Henry has to do a report. Bate's expression changed immediately into understanding. Oh, her. Henry looked between them. Okay, so I'm missing something here. Todd glanced at him. She's a teacher who pushes personal connection a bit hard with Will. It got complicated, Will added flatly on his tablet. Very complicated. Bate crossed her arms. She always thinks she's being helpful. Henry hesitated, then spoke more carefully. It's a good book, though. I get why she picked it. Will looked at him. Henry added quickly, but I see Will's point, like you can't force people to write about stuff they're not ready to talk about. There was a short pause. Bate nodded once. That's fair. Todd leaned back slightly. Exactly, that's where it became an issue. Will's grip on the tablet loosened a bit, not relaxed but less sharp than before. He typed one final line, "People think books fix everything." Henry shook his head slowly. They don't. Bate looked at both of them for a moment, then softened her voice. No, but they can still help if nobody forces it. The room settled again, still complicated, still messy, but a little more understood than before. Will sat back a little, exhaustion settling in deeper now that the adrenaline of the day was gone. He typed slowly, "Henry Raincheck, I can't help you if she gave you the book." Henry looked up from his notes immediately. For a second he looked like he might argue, then he just nodded. I get it, he said. Bro, it's okay, I understand. No sarcasm, no pushback, just simple acceptance. A beat passed. Will's shoulders eased a fraction, like that answer mattered more than he expected. He typed again, "Dad, can I get in my bed?" Todd was already moving before the words were fully finished on the screen. "I got you," he said gently. "I'll change you in your room." Bate stepped aside as Todd helped guide the chair down the hallway, the house finally shifting from tense conversation mode into something quieter, routine, familiar, safe. Henry stayed in the living room for a moment, pen resting on his notebook. The book sat open in front of him. This time he didn't rush to write anything. Henry stayed by the coffee table, the book still open in front of him, but his attention clearly somewhere else now. He looked up at Bate. "Mom, do you think Ms. Williams gave me this book to compare the main character to Will? Because I was doing that today. Was I being ableist? It feels like it now." Bate didn't answer too quickly. She set her keys down properly this time and walked closer, taking the question seriously. "You know your brother way before you got the book," she said calmly. "Will likes the book, but the teacher that gave it to you is the issue." Henry frowned slightly. "So I didn't mess it up." Bate shook her head once. "You're still learning how to talk about this stuff. That's not the same as being cruel or ableist. Intent matters, but so does listening when someone tells you how something lands." She glanced down the hallway where Todd had taken Will. "Comparing characters isn't the problem," she added. "Forcing real people into those comparisons without understanding them, that's where it gets messy." Henry leaned back on the couch, processing it. "So I wasn't being weird." Bate gave a small, honest shrug. "You were being a student doing a book assignment. Now you're thinking about it more deeply. That's actually a good thing." Henry let out a slow breath. "Okay," he said quietly, "that makes more sense." Bate softened her tone. "Just talk to your brother normally. Don't overthink every sentence like it's a test." From down the hall there was the faint sound of Todd checking on Will, routine, gentle, familiar. Henry looked back at the book, but this time he didn't feel like it was accusing him anymore. Henry stood in the doorway of Will's room, hands shoved lightly in his hoodie pocket. "Can I come in?" he asked. From inside, Will was already settled back against his pillows while Todd finished organizing supplies nearby. Will lifted his tablet. Come Dad, finishing up changing me. Henry stepped in carefully like he wasn't sure how welcome he still was. Look sorry, he said. There was a pause where even Todd slowed his movements a little, giving space for the moment. Will looked at him for a second, then typed. I'm not mad at you or the book itself. I like that book, but that teacher who gave you it. He paused, then finished the thought more bluntly. Is the issue? Henry let out a small breath he'd been holding. Yeah, he said quietly, I think I get that now. Todd adjusted the blanket gently over Will's legs and stepped back slightly. Good, he said simply, because nobody here is trying to turn a book report into a fight. Will gave a tired half-smile and added one more line, just don't make me your case study. Henry huffed a small laugh. Deal. The room settled again, less tense, more real this time, like everyone finally understood where the lines actually were. Henry leaned against the doorframe, quieter now, like the earlier tension had finally burned off. I wasn't trying to, but the day we had, he said, trailing off, it just kind of happened. Will watched him for a second, then lifted his tablet. You did it without knowing. Henry went slightly, then nodded. Yeah. A pause stretched between them, not uncomfortable this time, just honest. Todd finished tidying up the last of the supplies and stepped back from the bed. That's usually how most misunderstandings happen, he said gently. Nobody wakes up planning to hurt someone. Will adjusted his blanket a little, settling deeper into the pillows. His exhaustion made everything slower, softer around the edges. Henry looked at him. I just didn't think about it the right way. Will typed again, smaller this time. Now you are. Henry gave a small nod. Yeah, I am. The room went quiet for a moment after that, not the heavy kind of quiet from earlier. The calmer kind where nothing needed fixing immediately, just understanding sitting there instead. Will shifted a little against the pillows, tablet resting on his chest as he typed slowly, like the words were finally catching up to everything that had happened in one long stretch. The day was long, the book Ms. Williams, and I'm still getting used to this feeding tube. A small breathy laugh slipped out of him, tired but real. He added, and that book is just a story. Don't write about this because I'm not a book, I am a real man. The room went quiet for a beat, not awkward this time, just thoughtful. Henry glanced down, then nodded once. Yeah, he said softly, you are. Todd pulled the blanket a little higher over Will's legs and spoke gently. That's the most important part of all of it. Will's grip loosened on the tablet as exhaustion finally won out again, his eyes drifting heavier. But before fully slipping under, he added one last small line on the screen. Real life is messier anyway. Henry let out a quiet, agreeing hum. True. The room stayed calm, no arguments left, no misunderstandings to untangle right now, just the steady feeling of a long day finally starting to end. Henry let out a short breath that was half laugh, half disbelief. Thank you for your point of view, he said, a little awkward but sincere. Will's fingers moved before Henry could sit with that too long. Henry, tell Ms. Williams to go F herself from her favorite student. Henry immediately shook his head. Yeah, no, I can't do that. Will's eyes narrowed slightly with tired amusement as he typed again. I wanted you to understand where I was coming from, but at your graduation I will then. Henry blinked. That sounds like a threat. It's not, Will typed back, it's emotional scheduling. Todd, who had been quietly watching from the side of the room, let out a low chuckle. I think we're done with Ms. Williams for today. Henry nodded quickly, agreed. Will sank deeper into the pillow, the tension finally gone from his shoulders. Good, he typed, she's exhausting. Henry sat down on the edge of the bed for a second, more relaxed now, we can agree on that. Todd dimmed the room lights a little, the atmosphere easing fully into nighttime calm. All right, he said softly, no more school politics, just sleep. Will's eyes were already closing again, the tablet slipping slightly in his hand. But he still managed one last line before drifting off. Finally, Todd gently adjusted the rail on Will's bed, making sure it was secure before stepping back. I'll get your nighttime feed set up, he said calmly. The room had shifted into full evening mode now, lights dimmed, voices lowered, everything slower. Will was already half asleep, eyes barely open as the exhaustion from the day finally caught up with him. Todd finished positioning the bed properly, careful with every movement like this routine was second nature now. The pump bag was checked, tubing secured and everything placed within reach. Henry stood quietly near the doorway, no longer interrupting, just watching the calm routine after such a long day. "All right," Todd said softly, "we're good, you can rest now." Will gave a small, barely there nod, tablet resting loosely in his hand. No more jokes, no more arguments, just the steady hum of nighttime care settling in. And finally, the day let go. Henry stepped closer quietly, noticing the tablet slipping a little in Will's hand. He picked it up gently and plugged it into the charger beside the bed so it wouldn't die overnight. "Night, bro," he said softly. Will didn't fully open his eyes this time, he just gave a small, tired nod that barely counted as movement, but it said enough. Todd checked the final settings on the pump and nodded toward the door. "All right, we're good, let him sleep." Henry lingered for a second looking at Will, really looking this time, not like earlier in the day but with something calmer now, then he stepped back. "Yeah," Henry said, "night." Todd dimmed the light completely, leaving only the soft glow from the medical equipment and the quiet rhythm of everything settling into place. The door eased shut and the house finally went still.